The only congratulations my girlfriend offered after my biggest achievement was, "Hopefully it lasts." I thanked her for coming. Strange how quickly doubt changes once other people start believing first. My wife, my girlfriend, at the time, looked at the framed certificate on the kitchen counter, said "hopefully it lasts," and went back to scrolling her phone. I remember thinking I'd misheard her. I stood there in my work clothes, still smelling like the conference room coffee they'd served at the ceremony, holding a bottle of Prosecco I'd bought on the way home, because some part of me still believed this was worth celebrating. "That's it," I said. "What do you want me to say, Nolan?" She didn't look up. "Congratulations, you got a piece of paper?" The piece of paper was a certified transportation broker certification I'd studied for on my lunch breaks for 4 months, plus a promotion to senior broker at Ashcroft Logistics, plus a bonus that would cover our rent for 2 months. It wasn't nothing. It felt like the first real thing that had gone right for me in 3 years. I thanked her for coming to the little office reception anyway. I don't know why. Some habit of politeness that had outlived whatever it was supposed to protect. I didn't understand yet how strange it would feel, 10 months later, watching people who barely knew me believe in me faster and more completely than she ever had. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. Her name was Reagan Voss. We'd been together 3 years, engaged for 4 months, living together in a 1-bedroom off South Boulevard that smelled like the dry cleaner downstairs no matter how many candles she bought. I worked freight brokerage at Ashcroft, a mid-sized outfit near the rail trail in South End. Reagan worked in marketing for a dental practice group, 3 locations, always overworked, always tired in a way she wore like an accusation. We met the ordinary way. Mutual friend's birthday, a rooftop bar in Noda, her laughing at something I said about parallel parking that wasn't even that funny. I liked that she noticed details. I liked that she remembered the name of my dog from years before, a beagle named Otis who died the winter before we met, because I'd mentioned him once in passing. For the first year, it was good. Genuinely good. We had a rhythm. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market on Kings Drive. Thursday trivia at the place with the bad nachos. The kind of easy domestic comedy where you learn someone's specific irritations, like how she couldn't stand when I left cabinet doors open, and I learned to close them without thinking about it anymore. The cracks didn't come from one thing. They came from money, mostly, the way it usually does, dressed up as other arguments. I was 28 when we met, making $61,000 a year as a junior broker, which in Charlotte covered rent and not much else. Reagan made 72. She never said it out loud, not directly, but I noticed the way she'd mention her co-worker's boyfriend, an ortho resident, like it was just conversation. I noticed how she paid for dinner more than I did those first 2 years, and how she'd wave it off, and how the waving off started to cost something neither of us named. "I'm not saying money is everything," she told me once, maybe 18 months in, both of us on the couch after a long day, her feet in my lap. "I just want to know we're moving somewhere. That's all. We are moving somewhere." Where? I didn't have an answer that satisfied either of us. I said something about the CTB certification, about how brokers who got certified moved into better book of business assignments, better commission splits. She nodded in the way people nod when they've already decided the conversation is over. The certification took me 4 months of studying between 11 at night and 1 in the morning, at the kitchen table, my laptop open to carrier compliance modules while Reagan slept. I passed on the first attempt. Ashcroft posted the promotion internally 3 weeks later. Senior broker, a $4,200 raise, plus a piece of the New England reefer account, which was the kind of account brokers waited years to touch. Temperature-controlled freight, high margins, low tolerance for error. My manager, a compact, sharp-eyed woman named Priya Deshpande, who'd run brokerage floors in Atlanta before Charlotte, told me flatly that she'd fought for me to get it. "You're not ready," she said. "But you're readier than the alternative, and the alternative quits within a year. Don't make me regret this." I didn't tell Reagan about the reefer account right away. I wanted to tell her at the reception, in front of people, so it would feel like something instead of just news. That's the part one keep coming back to. I wanted witnesses. The reception was small, 12 people in the Ashcroft break room, a sheet cake from Harris Teeter, somebody's Bluetooth speaker playing music too low to dance to and too loud to talk over comfortably. Priya gave a short toast that mentioned my name 3 times and the word resilient once, which embarrassed me more than it should have. Reagan came in 15 minutes late, in her work clothes, holding her phone like it might ring any second. She hugged me, said congratulations to the room in general, ate exactly one piece of cake, and checked her phone 4 times in the 20 minutes she stayed. On the drive home, I asked if she was okay. "I'm fine. Long day." At home, I put the certificate on the counter because I didn't know where else a certificate goes, and I opened the Prosecco, and that's when she said it. "Hopefully it lasts." I've turned that sentence over more times than I want to admit. At first I thought she meant the raise. Companies do layoffs, brokerages especially, margins get thin, accounts get pulled. That would have been a reasonable thing to worry about. But her face wasn't worried. Her face was the specific flatness of someone stating an opinion they'd already had for a while. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. "I'm happy for you." She still hadn't looked up from her phone. I just know how these things go. You get excited, you work like crazy for 6 months, then it fades, and we're back to where we started. This isn't a hobby, Reagan. It's a $4,200 raise and the best account in the office. Okay. She set the phone down, finally, and looked at me with something that might have been apology if it had gone another half-second further. "I'm sorry. I am happy for you. I've heard this before. From you. About the CTB thing, about the promotion before that. I want to believe it this time." I didn't say anything. I opened the Prosecco anyway, and we drank a glass each, and we didn't talk about it again that night. And somewhere in the not talking about it, I understood that something had shifted that we weren't going to be able to shift back. The reefer account nearly ended my career before it made it. New England reefer moved perishables, dairy, seafood, some pharma cold chain freight, up and down the I-95 corridor and out to the Midwest. The margins were good because the tolerance for failure was almost non-existent. A blown reefer unit, a late pickup, a carrier who didn't understand continuous power requirements, and you had 6 figures of spoiled product and a client who'd remember your name for the wrong reason. 3 weeks into managing the account, I assigned a load to a carrier who looked fine on paper. Insurance current, safety rating acceptable, decent reviews on the load boards. What I didn't catch, because I hadn't yet learned to catch it, was that the carrier had subbed the load to a broker-carrier hybrid outfit that ran older reefer trailers with unreliable APU units. The truck sat at a rest stop outside Roanoke for 6 hours with a dead auxiliary power unit. $41,000 of frozen seafood arrived at ambient temperature. Priya called me into her office. She didn't yell. She was worse than yelling. She was quiet and precise, and she made me walk through every decision I'd made on that load, out loud, in order, until I got to the exact point where I should have called the carrier directly instead of trusting the broker's word about equipment. "You know what separates a good broker from a liability?" she said. "A good broker assumes everyone's lying to him until they prove otherwise. You assumed the opposite." I went home that night and didn't tell Reagan any of it. Not because I was hiding it exactly, because I already knew what her face would do, and I didn't have room for it that day. I ate cereal standing at the counter at 9 at night, and she came in from the bedroom, phone in hand as always, and said, "You're being weird." And I said, "Rough day?" And she said, "Okay," and went back to the bedroom, and that was the whole conversation. The account survived. Barely. New England Reefer's ops director, a blunt New Hampshire transplant named Carol Whitfield, gave Ashcroft one more chance on the strength of Priya's relationship with her, not mine. I spent the next 2 months building a carrier vetting process that didn't exist before. Physical calls to shippers listed on carrier MC numbers, insurance certificate verification instead of just trusting the load board badge, a spreadsheet of every reefer-capable carrier in a 300-mile radius of Charlotte with notes on their actual equipment, not their claimed equipment. It wasn't glamorous. It was Excel and phone calls and staying 40 minutes late most nights. But it worked. 6 months later, the account had grown from 1 lane to 4, and Carol Whitfield started asking for me by name instead of Ashcroft in general. I told Reagan about the growth in pieces, over months, the way you feed information to someone who stopped being hungry for it. She'd nod. She'd ask reasonable follow-up questions. But there was a distance in it now, a kind of careful neutrality, like she'd decided not to invest in the outcome until she saw the outcome for herself. We still had good nights. That's the thing people don't believe when you tell this kind of story, that it wasn't sad all the time. We still laughed at the trivia place. We still drove out to Lake Norman some Saturdays and did nothing in particular. Reagan still remembered, on my birthday that year, to get the specific bakery cannoli I liked from the Italian place on East Boulevard instead of a regular cake. But underneath the good nights, there was an accounting happening. I could feel it. Every time I mentioned something at work, She was quietly comparing it to a running ledger of promises I hadn't kept fast enough. The engagement happened in a strange, almost accidental way, the way I think a lot of engagements happen when neither person stops to ask if it's the right time. We'd been together 2.5 years. Her sister got engaged. Her mother, a warm but relentless woman named Diane who called twice a week, started asking Reagan-pointed questions at Sunday dinners. Reagan started leaving bridal magazines on the coffee table, not aggressively, just present, the way you leave something out for someone to notice without asking them to notice it. I proposed on a Tuesday, which in retrospect should have told me something. Not a big Tuesday. Just, I'd been carrying the ring for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment, and one Tuesday night after a decent day at work, I got in my car, drove to the jewelry store parking lot to think, and just decided I was overthinking it. I came home and did it in the kitchen, badly, no music, no plan, and she said yes, and cried a little, and called her mother immediately, and I remember standing there watching her talk to Diane on the phone and thinking, I don't know if this was the right moment or if I just got tired of holding the box. We got engaged in March. By July, wedding planning had become its own separate relationship stress. Venue costs, guest list fights about her cousin Wes, who I didn't like and she wouldn't cut, a conversation about honeymoon budget that turned, somehow, into a conversation about my salary again. I'm not trying to be difficult, she said, one night in July, both of us at the kitchen table with a legal pad of numbers between us. I just think it's fair for me to want some certainty before we do this. I make more than I did 2 years ago. I'm going to keep making more. I know you believe that. You don't. She didn't answer right away. She looked at the legal pad instead of me. I believe you believe it, she finally said. That's different. I remember that sentence landing somewhere specific in my chest, a kind of quiet, permanent bruise. I didn't say anything back. I picked up the legal pad and did math instead, because math didn't require me to know how to respond to that. The CTB certification was Priya's idea, not mine. She pulled me aside in October, almost a year before the reception, and told me flatly that if I wanted to move past mid-level broker pay, I needed the credential, because it was the difference between being trusted with growth accounts and staying assigned whatever came in. You've got good instincts, she said. Instincts don't pay for the mistakes you haven't made yet. The certification teaches you the mistakes in advance. I studied for 4 months. Reagan was, in that stretch, mostly patient, a little annoyed some nights when I stayed at the kitchen table instead of coming to bed, but not cruel about it. I remember one night in December, close to midnight, her coming out in an old college t-shirt, standing in the kitchen doorway, watching me highlight a page on hazmat placarding requirements. You're going to pass, she said. Not a question. Almost gentle. You think so? I think you're too stubborn not to. I laughed. It was, at the time, the nicest thing she'd said about my work in months. I passed the exam on the first attempt in February. 91%. I called her from the parking lot of the testing center, practically shouting it into the phone, and she said, "That's great, babe," in a voice that was warm enough that I didn't notice, until much later, looking back, that it had the exact texture of a voice congratulating a child on a spelling test, pleased, but not surprised, and not particularly moved. The promotion came through in April, effective the following month, timed almost exactly with the 1-year mark before our wedding. Priya told me in her office, closed door, no ceremony yet. That would come later, with the cake and the 12 people and the Bluetooth speaker. Senior broker, she said. 4,200 raise. And I'm giving you the reefer account outright. Not shared. Yours. I sat there for a second before I could say thank you properly. Don't thank me yet, she said. Thank me in a year if you haven't blown it up. I drove home that day wanting, more than I think I'd wanted almost anything in years, to walk in the door and tell Reagan and watch her face do something uncomplicated. Just once. Just relief, or pride, or even surprise. Something that wasn't measured against a ledger she'd been keeping since before I even knew there was a ledger. I didn't tell her that night. I decided to save it, to make it a moment, the reception, the cake, the room full of people saying my name like it meant something. I understand now that was probably the mistake. Not the account, not the promotion, the waiting. Because when I finally said it out loud, in front of an audience, some part of her heard it as a performance instead of news, and she responded to the performance instead of the news. Hopefully it lasts. Things didn't end in one conversation. They ended in 100 small ones, the way most things actually do, whatever the movies tell you. 2 weeks after the reception, I asked her to come with me to a work dinner. Carol Whitfield was in town from New Hampshire, and Priya wanted a small group at Sea Level, the good seafood place on South Tryon, to solidify the relationship now that the account had stabilized. It was, professionally, a genuinely big deal. Reagan came, dressed well, polite, charming even, for 2 hours. On the drive home, she was quiet. "You okay?" "That woman asked me 4 questions the whole night," she said. "All 4 were about your work. Nobody in that room asked me a single thing about mine." "I'm sorry. I didn't notice." "That's kind of the point, Nolan." She looked out the window. "You didn't notice." I didn't have a good response. I drove the rest of the way with the radio low, feeling something I didn't have words for yet. Not guilt, exactly, and not defensiveness, either. Something more like watching 2 true things exist at once without being able to reconcile them. That I had, in fact, gotten distracted by my own success, and that she had, in fact, stopped being able to be happy about my success without needing something from it for herself. In June, 6 weeks before the wedding was supposed to be finalized on paper, deposits, dates, the whole machinery, Reagan's job changed. Her dental group got acquired by a larger regional chain, and her marketing role got folded into a corporate structure that came with more money and a title bump. Regional Marketing Director. $94,000. More than double what she'd made when we met. I was, genuinely, thrilled for her. I took her to dinner. I told everyone I knew. I remember specifically thinking, at the time, that this might fix something. That if she felt secure on her own terms, whatever fear had been driving the ledger keeping might finally quiet down. It didn't fix anything. If anything, it revealed something. Because once she had her own version of what I'd just gotten, the title, the raise, the sense of being chosen by people who mattered, she started talking about the wedding differently. About the venue differently. About us differently. Less like a team building something together, and more like 2 people running parallel tracks that happened, for the moment, to be pointed in the same direction. "I was thinking," she said one night, maybe 3 weeks after her promotion, "maybe we push the wedding back a year. Just to be smart about it. Combine our raises, save more, do it right. We've had the venue deposit down for 4 months. I know. I'm just saying, now that things are actually stable. They were stable before too." She looked at me for a second too long. Were they? I didn't answer. I understood, in that silence, that she'd never actually believed they were stable before. Not really, not underneath the polite nodding and "that's great, babe." She'd been waiting the whole time for proof that didn't come from me. It came from a corporate acquisition, from someone else's decision, from a title with her own name on it. The breakup didn't happen the way I expected it to. I'd braced myself, over those weeks, for a screaming match, or an ultimatum, or some dramatic late-night confrontation. Instead, it happened on a Sunday afternoon in July, both of us folding laundry in the bedroom, sun coming through the blinds and stripes across the bed, a genuinely ordinary domestic moment. "I don't think I want to do this," she said. Not loud. Almost apologetic. I kept folding a shirt. "Do what?" "The wedding. Us. I don't know. All of it." I set the shirt down. "Where is this coming from?" "It's not coming from anywhere new. It's coming from 3 years." She sat on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap. "I've spent this whole relationship waiting to feel sure. And I thought the certainty would come from you doing well. And then you did well. And I still didn't feel sure. And I think that means the problem was never actually you doing well or not." "Then what was the problem?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think I know how to want something without being scared I won't get to keep it," she said. "And being with you. Waiting for you to become the version of yourself you kept promising you'd become. I think I turned that fear into a test. And I don't think that's fair to either of us." It was, I'll admit, the most honest thing she'd said to me in over a year. It didn't make it hurt less. "So that's it," I said. 3 years. I'm not saying it didn't mean anything. I'm saying I don't think I can keep doing this and be a person I respect. I didn't cry that day. I remember that specifically, because I expected to and didn't. I finished folding the shirt. I put it in the drawer. I went and sat in the car in the parking lot outside our building for 40 minutes without turning the key. And that's when it actually hit me. Not in the bedroom, in the car, alone, staring at a Waffle House sign 2 blocks down that I'd looked at 1,000 times without really seeing it. She moved out over the following 3 weeks. Slowly, in stages, the way people move out of a life instead of an apartment. Boxes to her sister's place in Ballantyne. A trip to take her books off the shelf, leaving gaps that made the shelf look like a mouth missing teeth. Her toothbrush stayed in the bathroom cup for 11 days after she was mostly gone, and I noticed it every morning, and I never mentioned it. And one day it was just gone too, and the cup felt too big for the one toothbrush left in it. The wedding venue deposit, $4,000, was non-refundable. We split the loss, technically, though I paid most of it because she'd started working double time to establish herself in the new regional role, and I didn't have the heart to fight her on $2,000 while everything else was falling apart. I kept the apartment. I couldn't afford it comfortably on my own for the first 2 months, so I ate a lot of rice and beans and canceled the gym membership I never used anyway. Priya noticed I looked tired at work and asked once if everything was okay at home, and I said, getting divorced from an engagement, as a joke that wasn't really a joke, and she didn't push, just told me to take a Friday if I needed it. I didn't take the Friday. I went to work every day because work was the only place that hadn't changed shape underneath me. The first month after Reagan left, I did almost nothing. I went to work. I came home. I watched television with the volume too loud for an empty apartment, and I fell asleep on the couch more nights than I made it to the bed. Grief, if that's the word for losing something that had been quietly ending for a year already, doesn't announce itself as grief. It shows up as forgetting to buy milk, as leaving the same 3 dishes in the sink for 4 days, as not noticing you've worn the same jacket to work 6 days running until a coworker asks if you're okay. The first real decision I made, the first thing I did on purpose, for myself, not in reaction to anything, was joining a gym near the office on West Boulevard, not the fancy one, just a Planet Fitness with bad lighting and a purple color scheme that made everyone look slightly sick. I went at 6 in the morning because I couldn't sleep past 5:30 anyway, and there was something almost meditative about the emptiness of it. A handful of other early risers, nobody talking, just the sound of machines and mirrors. I didn't do it to get in shape, exactly, though that happened too, eventually. I did it because it was 1 hour of the day where nobody needed anything from me and I didn't need anything from anyone else. My best friend, Marcus Webb, had been telling me for 2 years that Reagan wasn't happy and neither was I, and I'd spent 2 years telling him he didn't understand the relationship. After she left, he didn't say I told you so. He showed up at my apartment on a random Wednesday with a case of beer and a pizza and just sat with me while a Panthers preseason game played that neither of us cared about. You're allowed to be sad about this, he said, somewhere around the second beer. You don't have to perform being fine for me. I'm not performing. You've said, I'm fine 4 times tonight, and none of them sounded fine. I laughed, actually laughed, the first time in weeks. Okay, I'm not fine. There it is. We didn't solve anything that night, but it was the first time since July that I felt like a person instead of a problem to be managed. Work became, strangely, the steadiest thing in my life. The reefer account kept growing. Carol Whitfield's trust in Ashcroft, and specifically in me, had solidified into something close to loyalty. By September, 2 months after the breakup, the account had expanded to 6 lanes, and Priya put me in charge of building out a small team underneath me. 2 junior brokers, 1 fresh out of college, 1 career changer from retail management who reminded me uncomfortably of myself 3 years earlier. Training them taught me something I hadn't expected, that I actually knew things. That the carrier vetting process I'd built out of a bad mistake and a lot of late nights wasn't just personal paranoia, it was actually good practice. Good enough that Priya had started rolling elements of it into the broader Ashcroft onboarding for new hires. You built something, she told me, in October, during a one-on-one that had started as a routine check-in and turned into something more. Most people who get burned on an account just get more careful. You got more careful and then turned the caution into a system. That's rarer than you think. I didn't know what to do with the compliment except say thank you and go back to my desk and sit there for a minute longer than the moment required. The setback came in November, 4 months after the breakup, in a form I hadn't anticipated. Carol Whitfield's company got acquired by a larger cold chain logistics conglomerate out of Chicago, and the acquiring company had its own preferred broker relationships already in place. For 3 tense weeks, it looked like New England Reefer, my account, the one I'd rebuilt my professional identity around, was going to get folded into a broker I'd never met, 3 states away, and I was going to lose the biggest thing I had left standing. I remember sitting in my car in the Ashcroft parking garage after getting that news, gripping the steering wheel, feeling something close to panic for the first time since July. Everything I'd built in 4 months, the team, the reputation, the sense that I was becoming someone instead of just recovering from someone leaving, Felt like it was about to be taken by a decision made in a boardroom in Illinois that had nothing to do with me. Carol called me herself, 2 days before the transition meeting, from a number I didn't recognize. "I fought for you," she said, without preamble. "I told corporate I don't care what broker relationships they've got in Chicago. I'm not moving my cold chain to someone who doesn't answer his phone at 11 at night when a reefer unit fails outside Knoxville. That was you, 8 months ago." I remember things like that. The account stayed. Not because of luck. Because 8 months earlier, at 11 at night, exhausted and half convinced I was about to lose my job over the Roanoke mistake, I'd answered a call from a stranded driver and spent 3 hours rerouting a load instead of going to bed. I hadn't done it to build a relationship. I'd done it because it was the job. It turned out doing the job right, consistently, when nobody was performing for anyone, was the thing that mattered most. By December, 5 months out from the breakup, I wasn't the same person who'd sat in that parking lot outside our old apartment for 40 minutes without turning the key. I don't mean that in some dramatic, movie-ending way. I mean it in small, specific ways. I'd started cooking real meals instead of cereal at 9 at night. I'd started reading again, actual books, something I hadn't done consistently since college. I'd gone to therapy twice, which Marcus had been suggesting for a year, and which I'd resisted out of some vague, stupid pride, and which turned out to be less about fixing something broken and more about learning to sit with things instead of running from them. The therapist, a calm, unhurried woman named Denise, asked me once what I thought Reagan had actually needed from me that I hadn't given her. "Certainty," I said, almost immediately, because I'd thought about it a lot. "Do you think you could have given her that?" I sat with the question longer than I wanted to. "I don't think certainty was something I could give her," I finally said. "I think she needed to find it in herself, and she used me as the test instead." "Does that make you angry?" "It used to. Now it mostly just makes me tired." That was, I think, the most honest thing I'd said out loud in months. Priya offered me a bigger title in January, lead broker, cold chain division, a title that didn't exist at Ashcroft before because the division itself barely existed before me. It came with a team of 5 instead of 2, a meaningful raise, and, more than anything, a level of professional respect I hadn't fully believed I was capable of earning 18 months earlier when I was still failing carrier checks on the Roanoke load. I called my mother to tell her. Not Reagan. My mother, who cried a little on the phone, the good kind, and asked if I was eating enough, and told me my father would have been proud, which was the kind of thing mothers say that lands harder than they mean it to. I didn't call Reagan. There was, by January, no real reason to. We hadn't spoken since October, when she'd texted to ask if I still had a lamp of hers that had gotten left behind in the move. I dropped it off at her sister's place without going inside. I met Sable Ortiz in February at an industry mixer downtown that Priya had all but ordered me to attend. Networking, she said, was half the job of a lead broker, whether I liked it or not. Sable worked for a competing brokerage across town, sharp, funny, entirely unbothered by my slightly rusty attempt at conversation. We didn't start dating right away. It took months, actually, mostly texting, the occasional coffee. Both of us cautious in the specific way people are cautious after something that ended slower and sadder than either of us wanted to admit out loud. I mention her not because she's the center of this story. She isn't, not exactly, but because she was the first person, in a long time, who reacted to good news the way I'd once hoped someone would react. When I told her about the lead broker title, months into knowing her, she didn't say hopefully it lasts. She said, of course it did. You worked for 2 years like someone who wasn't sure he deserved it, and it turns out you did the whole time. I didn't know what to do with a sentence like that. I think I just sat there for a second, in the coffee shop, feeling something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was still clenched. The wedding invitation arrived in March, which was, in its own strange way, the moment I understood the shape my life had taken without me fully noticing. Not Reagan's wedding. Her sister's, the sister who'd gotten engaged first, the one whose engagement had started the whole avalanche of bridal magazines 2 years earlier. I was invited because I'd been, for 3 years, close enough to that family to have been included in the initial guest list drafted before anyone imagined I wouldn't be standing at the altar of my own wedding first. I almost didn't go. Marcus told me I should, in the blunt way he'd earned the right to be blunt with me over a decade of friendship. You've spent 8 months becoming someone you actually like, he said. Go be that person in a room where the old version of you used to shrink. I went. I brought Sable, not as a statement, just because we'd been seeing each other for months by then, and it felt natural. Diane, Reagan's mother, hugged me at the reception like nothing had happened, which was, I think, its own kind of complicated kindness. "You look good," she said. "Happier." "I am." "She'll be here," Diane said, not unkindly, more like a warning offered out of care. "I just wanted you to know before you saw her." I saw Reagan across the reception hall before she saw me. She was standing near the bar, in a green dress, laughing at something her cousin Wes said. The same Wes I'd never liked, still apparently a fixture. She looked, from a distance, exactly the same and completely different, in the way people do when the shape of your feelings about them has changed even though nothing about their face has. She saw me maybe 20 minutes later, near the dessert table, and her face did something I hadn't quite prepared for. Not shock, not coldness, something more like recalibration, the visible effort of a person updating a file they thought was already closed. "Nolan." She said it carefully, like testing whether the name still worked the same way in her mouth. "Reagan, you look good. So do you." Her eyes moved, briefly, towards Sable, who was a polite distance away talking to one of Priya's old contacts I'd introduced her to earlier. "Are you?" "Yeah. A few months." "Good." She nodded, several times, more than the moment needed. "That's good." There was a silence that neither of us moved to fill immediately, the kind of silence that used to mean something specific between us, and now just meant two people standing near a dessert table at someone else's wedding. "I heard you got promoted again," she said finally. "Lead broker." Diane mentioned it. "I did." "That's..." She stopped, started again. "I'm glad it worked out. The way you wanted it to." I could have said something sharp. I thought about it, actually, standing there. Some version of "Do you remember what you said the last time I told you good news?" Some version of it took a while for it to feel like it mattered to you either. I didn't say any of it. Not because I'd forgiven everything, exactly, but because I didn't need her to understand what those months had cost me anymore. I'd already understood it myself, and that had turned out to be enough. "It did," I said instead. "It took a while, but it did." We ended up, almost by accident, at the same corner of the patio 20 minutes later, both of us there to escape the noise of the dance floor, both surprised to find the other had had the same idea. "Can I ask you something?" she said, after a minute of looking out at the string lights over the pool instead of at me. "Sure." "Do you hate me?" "For how I acted back then?" I thought about it honestly, which is the only way I know how to answer things anymore. "No," I said. "I was angry for a while. I'm not anymore. I think you were scared of something you'd been scared of a long time before you met me, and I happened to be standing there when it came out." She was quiet for a moment. "I think about that night a lot," she said. "The reception, when you got the certification and the promotion. I think about what I said. Hopefully it lasts." "Yeah." She looked at me then. Actually looked, the first real eye contact since I'd walked in. I wasn't lying exactly. I really didn't believe it would. Not because I didn't think you were capable. Because I didn't think I was the kind of person things lasted for. And it was easier to make that about you than about me. "I know." I said it gently, because it wasn't a fight anymore, and there was no version of tonight where it needed to become one. I figured that out eventually. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Really? Not the wedding toast version?" "Yeah," I said, and meant it in a way I hadn't expected to mean it out loud to her. "I like who I am now. I don't think I liked who I was becoming, back then, waiting for you to believe me before I believed myself. I don't do that anymore." She nodded slowly, and there was something almost like relief in her face, the specific relief of someone realizing they hadn't ruined something permanently, even if they'd ruined it for themselves. "I'm glad," she said. "I mean that. I believe you." We didn't hug. We didn't exchange numbers or promise to stay in touch, or any of the small false rituals people perform at the end of these conversations in movies. She went back inside to find Wes and the rest of her family. I stayed on the patio another few minutes, looking at the string lights, feeling something settle in my chest that had been unsettled, in one form or another, for almost a year. Sable found me a few minutes later, handed me a glass of the wedding's mediocre Chardonnay, and didn't ask who I'd been talking to, though she clearly knew. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah," I said, and this time it wasn't a performance. "Actually, yeah." I drove home that night with the windows cracked, the early spring air still cold enough to feel sharp against my face, and I thought about the framed certificate that had sat on that kitchen counter almost a year earlier, and the specific weight of a sentence, "Hopefully it lasts," that I'd carried around longer than it deserved. It had lasted, as it turned out. Not the relationship. The thing underneath the relationship, The thing I'd actually been building the whole time without fully understanding it. The version of myself who didn't need someone else's face to do something uncomplicated in order to know the work had mattered. I still have the certificate. It's not on a kitchen counter anymore. It's in a drawer in my new apartment, the one I moved into in January, closer to South End, with better light in the mornings. I don't look at it often, but I know it's there, the same way I know the carrier vetting spreadsheet is still running somewhere on the Ashcroft servers, quietly protecting accounts I'll never personally touch. The same way I know some things you build outlast the people who doubted you'd build them. Sable was waiting up when I got home, reading on the couch with the lamp on low. She didn't ask how the wedding was, not right away. She just made room for me next to her, and I sat down, and for a long moment neither of us said anything, and the silence didn't feel like the kind that used to sit in my old apartment, heavy with things unsaid. It felt like the ordinary kind, the kind that just means you're home.